Welcome back to Podcast Recovery, everyone. We're your hosts, David O.
And Eric B.
Today we're joined by our special guest, Tom. How are you doing today, man?
Doing great, guys. Really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Where are you from? Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Where are you from, Tom?
I live in Florida right now. I live on the west coast of Florida, the Tampa Bay, Clearwater area. But I'm originally from Illinois, Rockford, Illinois. If anybody knows where that's at the top of the state, almost in Wisconsin. So that's where I've spent most of my life.
Nice. And when were you first introduced to recovery?
First introduced, I guess it would have to be, it was in the month of December in 2002 when I first, in my case, went to my first AA meeting. And that's kind of the introduction to recovery. I say recovery in quotes because I thought I knew what recovery was at that time, but I really didn't. That came later. But that was my first exposure. So it's been a while ago now, but it doesn't seem that long ago to me, actually.
Nice. And how long have you been clean or sober?
Yeah, so it was December of 2002. So I'm in my 17th year, 17 and a half years right now at the time of this broadcast. So this coming December, it'll be 18, but I'm not there yet. So we're just going to call it 17.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, congratulations for that. And with all that out of the way, we're going to turn it over to you to share your story with us. So take it away.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. As I said, for me, AA was my first exposure. I got into AA after a good solid 20 years of big time drinking. I was one of those guys that drank and did drugs and all the things that maybe a lot of us did in varying quantities through the years. And while I experimented with pretty much most drugs that were out there, it was really alcohol that was the thing for me. That was the thing that I loved the most. It was the thing that made me feel comfortable in my own skin. It was the stuff that, gave me the confidence and the social lubrication, if you will, to be the guy that could get out there and just talk to people and do things and all that kind of stuff. And so from a very early age, that was what it was for me. And so, for me, drinking is the main thing that really got me, And so, when I went to AA, I went there because I thought I was going to learn how to either quit drinking, or in the back of my mind, I thought, well, you know what, maybe I'll just learn how to moderate this thing and get some of these monkeys off my back and get some of these people off my back that were telling me I was drinking too much and all these kinds of things. But truth of the matter is I knew at the time that things were really, really out of control. And in AA, what I learned back then and for the years after that was kind of like three things. I'll just share it in this way. They talk about what happened, what it was like, and what it's like now. And for me, I came from a family of drinkers. It was like a lot of people I've heard on your guys' show here, your podcast, and others of my own conversations. I grew up around drinking. It was normal to drink in my family. Everything was about drinking. It was at night, and it was on the weekends, and it was holidays, and it was birthdays and vacations, right? Any kind of a special event, camping trips, whatever. It was normal. I grew up with that. And when I got into my teen years, started drinking in earnest as well. And it was never looked down upon. In fact, I was probably looked at weird if you didn't drink where I came from, and nobody really talked about it ever being a problem in my family that I can recall. I don't ever remember it being discussed in that way. It was just what you did, and from the holidays and birthdays, as I got older, drinking became Mondays and Thursdays, or just any day, really. And for me, at the end, it was all the time, And growing up, I was a kid who I grew up in the 70s, and I was just enamored with music and rock and roll. That's my background. I'm a musician.
Oh, yeah.
Been in bands and rock bands and things for my whole life, and I still do it to this day and in all kinds of different ways. But I idolized and wanted to emulate all all my heroes in music. I was just infatuated with it. And I grew up, doing all that stuff and following all that stuff. And, I grew up in bars with neon lights and, late nights and pool tables and pinball machines and music and all that kind of stuff. That stuff was always going on. So I remember being just loving being in bars. The atmosphere of a bar or a club, whatever you want to call it. I felt comfortable there. I loved everything about it. And when I was a little kid, I would go with my dad and other people. And when I got older, it was just natural for me to end up in bars all the time. I was one of those guys. I was out and about all the time. I wasn't necessarily the stay-at-home, drink by yourself person. Although I did that at the end a lot, But that was my whole thing. And I remember the very first time I ever drank anything, and the very first time I ever got drunk, I was in 9th grade, and it was Memorial Day weekend, and sitting around with my friends, and we were going to this festival fair thing in our town, and I drank. I had, of all things, the first thing I ever drank was a Heineken beer. And I had 4 of them. And I remember we were sitting in this guy's basement drinking beers. I had 4 Heinekens. I remember sitting there. I looked at my friends. I said, I don't feel anything. I'm fine, And then I stood up.
Yep.
And immediately fell over and crashed into this TV set that was on this stand. And it was a mess. And from that moment, it was game on, And I loved how it made me feel, like I said. And I used to say, and I still say, I was everything I always wanted to be when I was drinking. It gave me this feeling that I could do anything or be whoever I wanted to be. But I didn't understand at the time is that, of course, that was all an illusion. It was artificial. It wasn't real. And so all through high school, this is what I did. My friends and I, and we formed rock bands, and we did all that stuff. And that carried on into college after that, continued playing in bands. The thing is, I was one of those guys, though. I was a pretty good student. I never let that stuff derail my school. I got decent grades, graduated from high school, went to college, graduated from college, all that stuff. But, it was always this like dual existence for me. It was this academic thing and an eye on the future and wanting to set myself up to succeed in life, whatever that was going to mean. But at the same time, the other side was this, like I said, late nights and neon lights. I was partying and drinking and doing drugs and running around. You don't have to be in a well-known, famous rock band to experience all the trappings, of that. The sex, drugs, and the rock and roll, that's real even for local and regional bands. And me and my friends, we dove into all that head first, constantly. And, it was fun at first. It was all good times. It was great. And I remember a lot of it, and I say a lot of it because not all of it. A lot of it was kind of hazy, quite honestly, at this point. But, we did everything. And, in the beginning for me, the drinking, I drank for 2 main reasons. One was for celebration. If something was good, things were happening, fun was happening, good things in life, you drink and do drugs and all that kind of stuff, and that made it all better, But then the other side, the reason I drank too was for what I called consolation. And shit wasn't good when I was down and out, which was often, and when things were bad or when there was problems or to take the edge off, all that kind of thing. Either way, I was always drinking. And I was the kind of guy, I called myself a hit and run drinker, I was a hard rocking, hard drinking guy. I would binge drink for days on end and then maybe sober up and dry out for a day or two and, start to feel a little bit better. And then I would go again. And that was just it. Like I said, 20 years I was doing that. And, I remember talking to my friends all the time in the bars and everywhere we were, wherever. And I always had big plans for what I was going to do in life, especially when I was younger, I called it the gonna do's. I would tell them, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And this is my plan. This is my intention and all these things. Right. And, the truth is, guys, is that I didn't really do a lot of the things that I claimed I was going to do. was all just talk, late nights and bars and stuff. And all I had enough energy for was to get up and do it again the next day, the drinking and all that kind of stuff, And so that was kind of the existence for me. I was arrested multiple times. I was in jail. I got felonies, this and that. I should have been arrested 100 times. I should have gotten multiple DUIs, but that was one thing that somehow that eluded me. I never got a DUI, but I should have. I definitely should have, and I'm not proud of that. But it's just the story that I had, and. And there was a period of time for me that I remember learning. I remember I was in Southern California one time on a trip, and this radio station was on, and I heard this DJ say, there's 3 stages of partying. Stage 1, it's all fun. Stage 2, it's fun with consequences or fun with problems. And stage 3, all problems. And for me, as simple as that sounds, that's kind of how it was for me. It was great.
Yeah.
And then it was great, and then I started having things going wrong, but I was justifying those away and rationalizing that stuff. And then toward the end, it just became all problems for me. And, as Steven Tyler from Aerosmith says, it was just days of night. And that's really what it was for me toward the end. And but I did the thing that a lot of people do. My journey was one of, like I said, I was in high school playing in bands, and I went on to college, and I graduated from college, and I had all these things going on. And then I got into adulthood, and I got married, and ironically or not ironically, my family, we owned a bar for a while. That was a great move.
Yep.
Put a terrific hardcore boozer like me into a situation where I was in a bar every day of the week because I was running it, and certainly enjoying the trappings of all of that. And that just escalated everything. But got married, running a business, had a kid, of course, got divorced, after only a few years of that. And, then for me, the story went, I made a different change in career. I got onto a new career path, and I was one of those guys who was in sales and traveling all over and doing all that stuff. And my career took off, and at the same time my career took off, so did my drinking. It got even worse because I was succeeding in life, or so I thought, and I had money and all these things. And it was just a natural progression to continue on drinking, and celebration, like I was saying. And after many years of not playing music anymore while I was married and stuff, because I had to, quote, grow up and get a real job, at least that's what I was told, right? After getting divorced and everything, after many years, I got back into playing rock and roll again. And in this case, it was the late 90s. Got into a band again with some friends, and it really took off, and we did really well. We toured throughout the Midwest. We recorded an album. We did all these things, and of course, you can imagine all that did was fuel the drinking even more, and the drugging and all those things, and so that's kind of how it went, when in those days, in those later days for me as a huge drinker, it was just always, there was always a party, and there was always a reason, and there was always something. But I was getting into that stage 2, stage 3 that I was telling you about, with the problems started to creep in. And I started to realize that, man, I sometimes I can't control how much I drink. And I hadn't really thought about it. This is a good 15 years into my drinking career. And I started to realize, I can't control it. So I had a couple of bouts of quitting, and I'm doing air quotes right now. I quit. I quit one time for 6 months just to prove it to myself or prove it to other people. See, I don't have a problem. I'm good. You guys can probably relate, right? And then I went right back into it, and it took off from there again. And then I don't know, another year or two went by, and then I decided to quit again. And this time I strung together 18 months, a year and a half, and I thought, well, see, I got this thing beat. I'm all good. I can quit and whatnot. The thing is though, is that those 6 months and that 18 months, those two dry drunk times that I learned that term later in AA, I was a miserable dude, man. I was very happy. No, I wasn't drinking. I didn't put booze in my body at that time or any other drugs, but I was just an unhappy guy. I didn't understand the symptom problem thing, you know. I was treating the symptoms by not drinking, but I wasn't dealing with the problems underneath, the underlying issues that drove me to drink in the first place. And all of that would have sounded like gobbledygook to me back in those days, but I learned that later, you know. So, you know, like I said, drinking was the thing. You know, I did plenty of drugs though too. I never described myself as a drug addict, but rather a drug advocate. You know,
nice.
I endorsed, encouraged, and consumed all kinds of drugs. You know, mushrooms, acid, barbiturates, cocaine, you name it. I guess you know, for me, fortunately, I never got to the point where I stuck a needle in my arm or anything like that. I'm very fortunate that I didn't. I don't know why. Somehow I drew the line there, but I didn't go there. I don't know that I'd be talking to you if I did. I'm not sure, you know, but so those last days, those last couple of years of drinking, I started to develop rules around drinking. You know, I'm only going to drink beer on the weekdays, and we'll save the hard liquor for the weekends, or I'm only 2 days in a row, and then I'll take a day off, and whatever it was. I had all these bullshit rules, you know, and I remember thinking to myself back then, even then in my haze, I remember thinking, you know, if I'm trying to control my drinking, I'm pretty out of control already. Yeah. You know, I mean, we don't try to control something unless we feel that somewhere deep down in our minds that we're out of control. Why else would you try to control it? You know, so the 18-month period sort of came and went, and I remember I remember specifically it was June of 2002, and my band was playing a gig, and as soon as we got done with the last note of the last song, we're at this bar, this club. And, you know, we played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gigs through the years. And I got done, and I had it planned in my mind. I learned later too, they say relapse is premeditated. That could be a controversial statement to some people, but in my mind, I knew I was going back. I just sooner or later. And in this case, the next day after this show that I was talking about, it was my friend's wedding, and I was in his wedding. And so I wasn't going to go to a wedding and be a best man and all of that kind of stuff and not drink. So I had decided in advance I was going to start up again. So we got done with that show. I went up straight to the bar and I ordered a Corona. And that was the beginning of the final 6 months of my what became, you know, my drinking. And from June of 2002 until December 16th of 2002, my drinking was at levels that I'd never seen in all the years before. I mean, it was just, I'd come off 18 months of not drinking, and it just went through the roof. Honestly, you guys, that 6 months is very dark and very foggy. I don't really remember a lot of it, other than it's all I did was drink day and night, and that was beautiful. And so what happened was just that the last night I drank, it wasn't a plan. It wasn't a plan to stop drinking. It was just, I woke up the next day, it was December 17th, and I just remember feeling just physically so bad, like I was going to die. My insides, my guts were just, you know, it might as well have been outside of my body type of a thing, you know. And I remember that night before I had been throwing up, which became a common occurrence. I'm not trying to be gross or anything, but the facts are that that's all I did was throw up. And at this point, stuff was coming out of me that I'd never seen before, colors of things and stuff. It was horrible, and it scared me, you know. And all I knew in 2002, you know, we're in the early days of the internet, if we all remember back, you know, and we didn't have all the things that we have today. And all I knew then, because actually a couple of months prior to that, I had come home one night, 3 a.m, you know, in a stupor. And I remember I'd looked up a phone number, a toll-free number for Alcoholics Anonymous in the phone book because that was all I knew to do. And I remember I called it, and I think I talked to somebody and didn't go anywhere, but I had that number still somewhere. So that next day, it was December 17th, 2002, I called the number again. I found out where there were some meetings in my in my area near my house, and I went to one. And I can tell you that I do a lot of things, past and present. I do a lot of things like public things. I'm in media and radio and TV and different things. I'm a speaker and stuff like that. I'm in front of people a lot. Things that a lot of people think, oh, those are scary jobs. And they are. But I got to tell you, nothing was more terrifying to me in my life, past or present, without a doubt, than the first time I went to that meeting. Because I was just petrified of what it meant, the label that I was going to get, who was going to be in there, who would know me. I was just embarrassed. I was humiliated. I couldn't believe my life had gotten to this point, but I had nothing else to do. I didn't know where else to go. It was the only thing I knew to do. I didn't know anyone to call. I knew nobody that was sober. Nobody. Yeah. You know? So I went to this meeting. And I went in there, I sat down, there's all these people. I was stunned at the cross-section of people that I saw, you know, the different kinds of people, men, women, young, old, all different races, religions, whatever. And I loved that. And all I can tell you, I don't remember exactly what was said that night, but I can tell you that whatever it was that I heard, I remember listening, and I heard things, and I heard people describing their experiences that in a way that I'd never heard anyone talk about it before. They were basically telling my story. They were basically sharing feelings and experiences. While the details may have been different, you know, they were telling my story. I could relate, and I never heard that before, as simple or crazy as that sounds. And I just knew that first meeting that I was in the right place, number one. And number two, I felt hope for the first time in years. I felt like, well, I don't understand all this. And I'll be honest, I didn't also fully believe that all these people who said they had 1 year of sobriety or 5 years or 10, I thought they were bullshitting. I thought that was not true because I didn't believe. How could that be? How can you go that? If you were really a big drinker or druggie like that, what you're describing, how can you not do that anymore? I just didn't understand that. But they were saying it. They were speaking a language that I understood. So I decided to come back the next day because that's what they said to do. Now, listen, I want to say this at this point. I'm of the belief, guys, that recovery can take many paths. And AA isn't AA or NA or CA or any of the those kinds of groups or any other group. Nothing's for everyone. That's just my opinion, and some people don't agree with me on that. Sometimes I get in trouble saying that. AA worked for me for a long time, but I fully realize that it doesn't work for everyone. People have different journeys or paths to recovery, and I know many people today that never went the route I went and have many years of sobriety or clean time or whatever, and they went a different way, and I say yay to that, you know. So I'm grateful for what, you know, happened to me and how I, you know, experienced and learned about recovery, and for me it began with AA, and that first night started me on a 10-year journey. I was a solid AA member in my hometown of Rockford, Illinois, for 10 years. I went to multiple meetings a week, every single week for 10 years. And, you know, I don't say that like, oh, yay me or something. I'm just saying that's I wanted to go. Initially, I was hesitant. I didn't believe it. I was a little, you know, dubious about it. But after a while, you know, I started to experience the gains from it. I started to experience the benefits. I started to learn. I learned so much. I learned that drinking wasn't my problem. I thought that was my problem. I thought if I just stopped drinking, then everything would be great. Well, things weren't. Drinking was the symptom to the problem. The problem was me and my thinking and how I felt about myself and blah, blah, blah. All these other underlying, psychological and emotional reasons. And while that might sound heavy, I would argue that that's all of us, no matter what we're recovering from or, walking through, So I learned all those things in AA, and I learned how to get honest with myself. And it gave me some structure, and it gave me a format, gave me a place to go. I met new friends and people that challenged me, people that are still my friends to this day, even though I currently am not a regular AA attender anymore. And it's not because I don't believe in it or something happened bad. It just, I needed to do something different. And so now today I give back in different ways. And one of those ways is like being here with you guys right now and talking about this, to try to encourage somebody else. So that's kind of that's the overview. Of course, there's a lot more details and we all have them, but, I just wanted to share the highlights. Here's what I'll say in conclusion on this part. I don't regret my past, but I do respect it. And even though it's been a number of years for me, I was fortunate. I didn't have to return to drinking. And after that first day, I haven't had any alcohol since that first day. I know that's not everybody's story, and that's okay. I'm not special. I'm not smarter than someone else. Just for me, that's just the way that it went. For some, they've got to fall off and get back on the horse a few times until they get it. That's okay too, But I respect my past, and that by that I mean I understand what it was, and I'm very aware of both the good and the bad that came from it. And so I'm very protective of it to this day because I don't want to go back to that life. And just earlier this week, as a matter of fact, I was talking to a good friend of mine who was struggling with drinking, and it's been sober for some time, but maybe has some thoughts, he said, about going back. Because, let's face it, the world is upside down right now for all of us, and it's been tough. And, he's like, he asked me this question. He's like, why didn't you ever return to drinking? And I said, well, that's a great question. And my answer is this. I haven't picked up a drink again, not because I'm over it, and not because I never think about it, not because sometimes, I'll be honest with you guys, I'm a straight shooter, not because sometimes it doesn't sound kind of good. It does. Yeah. But here's the thing. For me, I know if I do that I will not make it back.
Yep.
And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic with that statement. It's just the facts. That's what I believe in my heart of hearts. I saw and heard from too many people over 10 years in meetings that, they said they're going to go out and, do some more experimenting. That was the thing. Go back out and try it some more. And then they would come back. Some of them would come back, not all of them. I just don't think I'd make it back. And I also told them the other reason why I don't go back is because I think it's the ultimate selfish act. For me, drinking and drugging. I absolutely agree. Selfish. What's that?
I absolutely agree.
Yeah. And I just didn't want to be remembered for being that guy. I don't want to be. I don't want my son to remember me for being, the selfish guy who just had to drink because he just couldn't figure out any other way to cope with the shit that life was throwing him. I just don't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the guy. I don't want to be the guy that gave in to the urge, the guy that gave up, the guy that let everyone who loves him and cares for him down. At least, most of all, myself. I don't want to be. I don't want to be the guy who set the wrong fucking example. So I don't want to be that guy. I say fuck that guy, and so that's why I don't do it. Now, I didn't do any of it alone. I needed other people. I needed help. I need support. I was a good isolator at the end, and I still can be. But there's a lot of things in between there. And here's the other thing, because we never know who's watching any of us. Right? It doesn't matter if you've got 1 day, 1 year, 5 years, 17 years. It doesn't matter. You never know who's watching you and who you can influence or who's being influenced by you, good or bad. Because people don't believe any of us unless they can see proof of our claims, and people don't believe our words. They believe our actions. Either we're doing it or we're not doing it, whatever it is. And so I think about that every time the thoughts of drinking or drugging again come into my head. I think about all the things I'm saying here. And so I stay firm to that. And when I'm feeling down and out, or when I'm vulnerable, I reach out. I talk to other people who I know understand where I've been or where I'm at. And we do that and stuff. So that's the high level story of me, you guys. Obviously there's a lot of it, but it's still it's still a work in progress. I'm still a work in progress, but I'm grateful that I can share about it here today and be on Podcast Recovery with you two here right now. So thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Definitely have some questions for you. Eric, I've been going first a lot recently, so you can take it away.
All right. So my first question, and I mean, you touched on it throughout your story a little bit, on just kind of being, I come from an audiovisual background with my profession, and I mean, more in the corporate world now, but I still dabble with freelance gigs on, a somewhat frequent basis. But one of the hardest things I feel like for, and being in more of the like photography video side, you don't deal with this as much, but I know when, you're in the music side is much more inundated with drugs and alcohol. How are you able, not just able, but how do you manage kind of the temptations and cravings that, when you go to play a gig and you're at a bar, when you go like to band practice and there's people, smoking a joint or drinking, like what are your coping mechanisms for those situations?
Well, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. Yeah, it sounds like we have some similar backgrounds, Eric. I'm also a professional photographer, and specifically a lot of different genres. But I've been a concert photographer for many, many years, and shot some of the biggest bands and artists in the world. And I've been very fortunate to go. And I bring that up only to say that not only in my own band and playing music and being out in those environments that you're talking about, but also being in other environments where I'm a photographer and I'm around, rock stars literally and their entourages and the crews, and I'm backstage all the time. And, all of these situations I find myself in. It's really kind of amazing that I'm in them as much as I have been in them in my recovery all these years. And how I handle it is it's right now at this point, my identity is not a person who drinks and does drugs anymore. I used to. But my identity now is that I'm not that guy. I don't do that. I just don't. And I haven't for a long time. But here's the thing. For someone listening who's maybe earlier on in the journey, like for the first few years, for me personally, I don't think I could have done the things I do today then. And that might not be a popular answer, but I had to be very careful. In the early days, I didn't go to bars in the early days of my sobriety. I wasn't around that stuff because I didn't trust myself. I needed to get more of a solid foundation built and a better understanding of myself and the things that I was dealing with. And, I needed to, they used to say, change your playmates and your playpens in AA, you had to change your environments literally. And it's an interesting story. When I first got in sobriety, my first 5-6 months of sobriety, I remember I was in a meeting one day and the meeting got over and I was leaving the meeting. And a guy who was in the meeting who became a good friend of mine then and now, his name was Bob. And Bob, he came up to me. Bob was a big music fan, a rock and roll guy, music aficionado. He knew all about it. And me and him clicked on that. In those areas very, very well. Bob came up to me after the meeting and he said, "Hey, you still playing in that band? Your band?" And at the time I still was. It was like I said, 5 or 6 months in. He's like, "Are you still in the band?" I said, "Oh yeah. He just paused. He looked at me, looked down, looked away, looked up. He goes, "Huh." And he said, "Good luck with that." And he walked away. Now, guys, I was pissed. I was like, "What? Good luck with that." I left that meeting. I was so mad. I thought about that the rest of the night, the next day, till I went back to the next meeting. Long story short, I knew what he was telling me. He was basically saying, "Dude, if you're really serious about this, you're going to have to make some significant changes in your lifestyle if you want to maintain this. If it's really what you want." And again, that's another big thing I talk about, want versus need. Do you think you just need to get your act together and clean up and sober up, or do you really want to? I needed to years before I ever wanted to. And that's why I didn't. And so that's the other part of my answer to your question is today, I really want to be sober. I really want to be in recovery, healthy recoveries, emotional as well as physical sobriety. I want that. So when I'm in these situations that you're talking about and I see all these things going on, people doing drugs, drinking, whatever, all of that, it does affect me sometimes, not as much as it used to, but I remind myself of the fact of, I remember what my life was like at the end, and it was bad. I remember all the great things that have happened since I stopped doing all that shit, which are many of them are very good, but not all. And I really want to maintain what I've got. And if I ever get feeling too funky in any given situation, and I've done this before, I'll leave. Or I won't even go in the first place. Now, again, I realize that if it's somebody's job or whatever, well, that's a little bit difficult, more of a difficult situation. But, you decide where you got to be. I quit the band after that conversation with that guy that was Bob that one time, about a week or two later. One of the hardest decisions. I quit the band. The band was very successful. We were making money. We had a big following. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make, but I knew he was right. And I've thanked him ever since then, because had I stayed, I don't think I would have made it. I do not believe I would have made it, because I would have been too tempted, and I wasn't strong enough then. So it's like a muscle. It's like working out, right? The more we work out, lift weights or run, we get our endurance up, we get our strength up. It's the same thing with sobriety, whether it's drinking, drugs, all the above, whatever it is. So for me, it's really paying attention to where am I going and being honest with myself about how I'm feeling. And I won't go into a situation if I really, really have, reservations about it. But, but at the same, now the other thing, the final answer to that question is this. Like I was saying earlier, I also know that I look at those today as opportunities. I'm like in the minority of all these situations. I'm one of the only sober people. Sometimes there's others, but it's a few and far between. And I look at that as a positive, to be, maybe a beacon of light for somebody else. And people come up to me, "Aren't you drinking?" I'm like, "Oh no, why not?" I'd say, "Oh, I don't drink." "Well, why not?" And then my answer is something to the effect of, "I drank enough before for 3 lifetimes." That stops people in their tracks. Usually they're like, "Oh, okay." And then they walk away, So I want to be an encouragement to others. So that's another thing that helps me these days. But again, I had to build toward that. And so there's my long answer to your question. I hope that helps.
Nice. All right. I'm actually going to ask 2 questions. First one is for all 3 of us. Really a fun question. What's your favorite band from the 70s?
You guys want to start? If it's for all 3?
Yeah, we'll start with Eric. Eric, what's your favorite band from the 70s?
No, I'm not first. Let me think about this.
No. Tom, what do you got?
I'm going to go and see. There's so many. It's a hard answer. Off top of my head, I'm going to say Led Zeppelin.
Yep. Ditto. I'm going to match that.
Really?
Zeppelin was, oh yeah, Zeppelin's top of my head as well. I have a feeling Eric's gonna go deep cut.
No,
Deep cut?
Zeppelin.
What do you got, Eric?
Zeppelin was the first band that came to my head for 70s.
It's gotta be.
I thought about like Elton John and Bowie, but I kind of don't really. I mean, they are bands, but I think of them more as solo artists, even though they are 100% bands.
Well, we could do whatever musical artist from the 70s.
It's
a solo artist. That's fine.
I mean, it's Zeppelin, because Elton John. I don't know if his 70s stuff was really the stuff that I liked the most. I feel like it was more in the 80s.
You know why Zeppelin's a great answer to this question? It's because, in my opinion, Zeppelin is like every band. They had so many sides.
They're so well-rounded.
Yeah. They cover all the bases.
Yep. Absolutely. Correct answers. 3 correct answers all around. Good job.
Nice.
Good job, everyone. All right. A real question. So you talk a lot about like throughout your you're using really like the mental obsession aspect of it. Like even when you had like those couple dry spells, it was still like kind of on your mind of like when am I going to go back?
Yep.
And even when you tried to like moderate your drinking and have all those rules, alcohol is still really controlling your mind by really dictating a lot of the aspects of your life. So coming into recovery, what sort of things did you have to do to really break that mental obsession with alcohol?
Well, the first thing was I can't stress how important it was for me to listen to other people who had already been where I was and listen to what they did or how they managed that obsession, or whether, again, and this is successfully or unsuccessfully. I can tell you that in the 10 years I sat in meetings that I learned as much from the people that came and went and maybe never came back as I did, the people that stuck in there and hung in there and put together, long-term sobriety. But what really helped me, to answer your question, what really helped me to start to break that obsession about thinking about drinking and drugging and wanting to, and when will I next, and when will I not, and what are my rules? It was when I started to understand why I was doing it in the first place. And again, I know that's sounds like a big nebulous answer, but I never thought about that stuff before. I never thought about it in that way. When I started to understand that I was using alcohol as a medication to feel better emotionally, when I was using it to placate feelings of insecurity and low self-esteem and, struggles with the fact that my parents were divorced and my dad wasn't around and all that stuff that we all read in Psychology 101 textbooks, that shit's all true. At least it was for me. So breaking it, listening to other people, being around other people, seeing and hearing other people's success or non-success stories, and really digging into my own background. And, honestly, I'm going to tell you, for me, it was the actual physical activity of working the steps. And I know some people be like rolling their eyes like, oh, that shit doesn't work. Well, maybe it doesn't work for you, but it worked for me, and it works for a lot of people. Maybe there's another way. Today, there's a lot more options. There are online things, other kinds of smart recovery. I'm a big fan of that. In recent years, I was a part of a fellowship down here in Florida where I live called Life Ring Recovery, which is meetings, but a different kind of a thing, more of a secular thing. And again, I'm not, some people are really into spirituality with the recovery and other people not so much, and this and that. And again, back to what I was saying earlier, I'm an advocate for all of it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you can't do it that way because that's not the way I did it, so therefore that has to be a less than. On my podcast called Recovery Collective, I've had people on from all different kinds of recovery backgrounds, some, many, most really different from my own. And I learned as much from them, as anyone else. So, breaking that mental obsession was for me, it required me getting down into the causes and conditions. Why was I really using it? Listen, I remember somebody told me one time, somebody said, hey, listen, I like Diet Coke. I like how it tastes, but I never willingly sat down in a night and drank a case of Diet Coke. You know, and that really, stupid as that sounds, that really stuck with me. You know, you say, oh, I like the taste of beer. I like the taste of alcohol, whatever. Yeah, but not in the quantities. It went to another level. I was using it for different reasons. And once I started to understand that, the obsession part started to become more manageable, started to become more in focus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had to do that inner work. The stuff that a lot of people that I used to want to run away from as fast as possible. And it was only, I wanted to go around my problems. And what I learned in recovery was I got to go through them. And it took a lot less time to go through them than it did around them, as it turns out. So there you go.
Nice. Fantastic. What you got, Eric?
So you talked about the steps, and well, I'm going to use one of the questions that David has stolen from me, and I don't usually ask as much anymore. But out of all of the steps, and you can only choose one step, what is your favorite step, and how do you use it most in your life?
You're not going to make a super dark analogy about it, Eric?
No, we're not going to talk about killing children. But yeah, we're going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
No dark analogies?
No, not tonight.
Yeah, this one time he was like, okay, you have 12 children and your house is on fire and you can only save one. Which one is it? And it's like, what the fuck? How is that equivalent to your favorite step? I was just like, what the fuck, Eric? And he was like, no, it makes sense. I was like, okay, if you say so.
You guys are funny.
But anyway.
I guess I'll say this. I guess my favorite step, the one that had the most impact on me, I think the one where I really turned the corner in my journey, the one where after I did this one, and I did it more than once, by the way, I started to really feel, maybe for the first time, that, okay, maybe I'm getting somewhere here. And that was step 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory. That sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook maybe to somebody who hasn't done the steps or doesn't even believe in them or whatever. But look, phrase it however you want. But I had to dig into me. Sorry, my dog's barking. All the things that I wanted to avoid, all the things that were dark and ugly and nasty about me, shit that I did that I wasn't proud of. Here's the other part. The things that I always wanted to blame everybody else for, but really I had a part in, you know, like, for example, getting divorced. Oh, at first it's all her fault. That's not true.
Yeah.
That is not true. I had a hand in it, you know, whether it was a bigger or smaller hand in it, who knows, that's up for debate. But, you know, I had a part in it. So doing a moral inventory and literally writing all that stuff down, which is what step 4 requires you to do, was a game changer for me. And that's, I guess, is my favorite step now in hindsight. At the time, I was like, oh God, I do not want to do that. Oh, and then going on in step 5, sitting down with a sponsor or somebody else and telling them about it. I mean, I had to reveal some things to another person that I'd never told anyone. That was brutal. But, you know, looking back on it, that forced me to, if I really want to get sober and I'm going to follow this program, writing all this stuff down, a searching and fearless moral inventory, that was a game changer, like I said. So that's probably my favorite one, because I know I remember there was a lot of people that I encountered who would get through the first 3. You get to that step 4, and it was always dragging their feet. You know, always having an excuse. I ended up sponsoring a lot of guys through the years, and they didn't want to do step 4. And I said, I get it. I said, but if you don't, you may not get past it. I mean, I'm not going to say for sure. I don't know, but you might not if you don't. If you're in this particular recovery program. And so, that's what I would say. It was that one. I still have the first one I ever wrote. You're supposed to burn them, at least where I came from. You go out, it was kind of a ritual. You write it all down. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but I did burn it, but I kept a Word document with it because I've gone back over the years and looked at it. And that's also been very helpful to me. The stuff that I wrote down back then, so yeah, step 4.
All right. Awesome. All right. My last question. We talked a lot about like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and kind of really the culture of alcohol and our relationships to it. And I think a lot of that is societal. So how can we as a society sort of change our relationship or culture around alcohol to not necessarily glorify it as much and bring more accurate awareness to what it actually is?
Yeah. Well, that's a big question, and that's a great one. I asked it. Alcohol. Let me just talk about alcohol because it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of the main thing with me. In my story, alcohol is, like you said, it's glorified. It's always in my lifetime. It's always been. Drinking is celebrated. It's revered even. And if you can drink a lot and still maintain and be out and do your job and kick ass and do this and do that, you're like respected more. You can drink everybody at the table. You're the last man standing. All that bullshit. All that false bravado. Society, endorses that. And I think it's changing a little bit as time has gone on in my lifetime, but it's still nowhere near where it needs to be. Like other drugs have been, take cigarette smoking, for example. It's nowhere, smoking cigarettes is nowhere near.
It is not cool anymore.
Cool. Yeah. As it today in 2020, it's nowhere near as cool, or maybe, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, widespread or whatever, or as positively viewed as say as it was, I don't know, in 1980 when I was a young kid.
Yeah.
It's changed, it's evolved, it's morphed. And I think alcohol, I don't know, it needs to go a similar route somehow, some way. I think one thing that's been happening, particularly in the last, 10 or 20 years, especially, is as technology has advanced into the research on alcoholism and drug addiction and the biology of the brain and dopamine and neurotransmitters and how all of that stuff works and how this, the disease model and all that. Again, I know these are controversial subjects for some people. I think the whole idea that addiction or alcoholism is some kind of a moral failure, that old fucking school thinking, that's toxic and dangerous. That if you're a person who has ever succumbed to alcoholism or drug addiction or whatever, that you're just somehow you're not as strong as somebody else who hasn't succumbed to that. That's bullshit. Society that's how it used to be, and that's changed slowly over time. So I think as technology and stuff continues to advance and we learn more about it, and we start to change our perceptions and our perspective around what alcohol is. Alcohol is a drug as much as it is, as much as cocaine's a drug, as much as nicotine and caffeine is a drug, and heroin and any other drug. It's a drug. It just happens to be legal and a part of our fabric as a culture. As we start to change that, and I see a ton of stuff, you guys, out on the internet now. There's a lot of groups and people that are pushing to change that. And I'm so happy about that. I'm so glad. I'd like to think that in 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, kids that are growing up, maybe alcohol is going to be viewed differently than it was, say, when I was growing up or when you guys were growing up. It won't be looked at as favorably because the science behind it and all of those things will have changed that. And I think that's the way it's going. Maybe it's slow moving like an iceberg or something, but, I think it's going that way. And I think it also is people like you two are doing a show, a podcast like this, and all the work that you guys do and stuff that I do and others in this space who are talking about this stuff openly and honestly. That's how we change it. So you guys are doing the work to change it right now. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate that. All right, Eric.
All right, so this is my last question. And you mentioned it a lot, but just kind of like bringing it all back into like a whole, holistic view. What does recovery to you mean now?
What does it mean to me now? It means that when, not if, I have feelings that I don't like, that instead of running away from them and putting something either literally or figuratively into my body or into my life or into my world to change my feeling state, and that's a phrase that I learned in recovery, feeling states. We all feel a lot of things. We're up, we're down, we're all around, and we always will be. But whenever our feelings are such that we're so uncomfortable that in the past we grabbed the drink, grabbed the drug, grabbed the girl, grabbed the guy, grabbed the food, grabbed the car, the money, the status, whatever. It doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol. Go to the gym 3 times a day, gamble, whatever it is. Recovery to me is learning how to deal with my feelings, whatever that means, however, whatever they are, and not running away from them and coping with them in a way that isn't as destructive as it used to be. That's what I did with booze. I poured booze all over my feelings. It was the one thing that helped me feel temporarily different. Not always better, even, just different. And so recovery is insisting, pressing forward, doing the things that might make me uncomfortable, like calling friends that are in recovery, going on podcasts, or writing down moral inventories, or going to meetings, or trying something new. If you hate AA and you think it's all bullshit, but you've never been, you're talking from a place of ignorance. You don't know. We all have to experience things for ourselves. Or if you think smart recovery is all a bunch of BS because it's all psychobabble, but you've never been, you don't know. So recovery is about doing the things that you've never tried, that force you into places of dealing with how you really feel in ways that you never have before. And while that's easy to say, it's very hard to do. While recovery can be simple at its core, it's hard to actually execute ongoing. So it's a daily reprieve. They say in the big book, it's a daily reprieve. That's all we get. Tomorrow I might be down and out, and I'm going to need to put some tools together. And fortunately for me, because of, recovery through the years, I've got a toolbox now of things that I can go to when I'm feeling whatever. And instead of picking up the drug or the drink, I can go to one or more of those tools and maintain that. And you know what? The funny thing I've learned, this is the last thing I'll say on it, whatever I'm feeling in the moment, and I think, oh God, it's the worst thing ever, and it's never going to, it goes away. It's not permanent. I always say, if you're feeling great right now, don't get used to it. It's not going to last. Sorry. You're not going to always feel great. And if you're feeling like shit, don't get used to that either. It also is not going to last. So find that middle ground and put the tools into place to help you stay there. So recovery to me is being honest and dealing with your feeling states in a healthy way, not in a destructive way. So there you go.
Love it. Great answer. All right. Well, I think we are about out of questions. So Tom, you're off the hot seat, buddy.
Well, thanks, guys. I hope that it was valuable. I hope that your listeners get some value out of it. And, come visit me on my sites. I got an Instagram page. It's called Recovery Collective. It's recovery_collective on Instagram, and then recoverycollective.net. I have podcast episodes there and other types of resources and writings and things. And so you never know what's going to resonate with someone. So I'm throwing it out there just to maybe offer some encouragement and help for someone else.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we would like to thank our guest, Tom, for joining us tonight.
Woo! Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you both.
We appreciate you coming
We
on.
appreciate you. Absolutely. Here at Podcast Recovery, we are aiming to expand the scope of support for recovering addicts. Accessibility and convenience of helpful services is paramount to combating addiction. We work to bring the message of recovery to every addict, wherever and whenever it is needed. We believe that a powerful voice of recovery should be obtainable, practical, and at the touch of a button. Every addict deserves to hear a message of hope, and Podcast Recovery is here to provide it. Now I'm going to turn it over to Eric for our media statement. I don't have a better word for that yet.
It's okay. You'll get there, David. Don't worry about it.
I'll get there. We'll workshopping it.
So, again, you know, we are fully self-supporting here at Podcast Recovery. And, you know, in order to bring you guys, you know, new content such as Thanks for Sharing or The Meeting After the Meeting or this podcast with Podcast Recovery, we need your support. So please join our home group, join the Patreon and become a member of the home group, or throw some money in the digital basket with our Venmo or PayPal links in the description below. Also, please join our Facebook group where you can chat with other members of the group about recovery, or our Facebook page, our Instagram page, or our Twitter page. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.
We also have YouTube. Eric forgot it.
We do
That's
have
a thing.
YouTube.
That's a thing
Yes,
as well.
we do. We do have YouTube where you can watch Thanks for
All right.
Sharing.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you check out all those media outlets for more information about Eric, Carly, Allie, and myself. Go to podcastrecovery.com. But most importantly, everybody out there, stay safe and stay clean.